Hi, I'm John Green. This is Crash Course U.S. History, and today we're going to talk about counterculture and the New Left. But we're not just going to look at the mid-60s into the 70s as peace signs and tie-dye. Instead, we're going to examine the movement as a social change in emerging culture. Starting with the Beats movement of the 50s, many of the youth began to reject conventional societal norms. Spurred with protests against the Vietnam War, they united in rebellion and questioned the government. As most famously displayed in USC Berkeley, the student free speech movement of 1964 formed to protest their limitations on the university campus. Birthed from these societal rejections, the hippie culture emerged. The origin of this counterculture movement was centered in Haight-Ashbury of San Francisco, California. Characterized with questioning the government, peace ideals, drugs, and rebellious music, Haight-Ashbury was quite different than any other city the public had previously been exposed to. Most famously, a 3-day festival in New York expressing peace, openness, and acceptance. This Woodstock festival featured the most popular artists of the time and symbolized what the counterculture movement really was: freedom of expression. As the 1960s progressed, social tensions also increased regarding human sexuality, women's rights, traditional modes of authority, the new use of psychoactive drugs, and differing interpretations of the American dream. It is now time for the mystery document. Stan? Thank you. We are people of this generation, bred in at least modest comfort, housed now in universities, looking uncomfortably to the world we inherit. When we were kids, the United States was the wealthiest and strongest country in the world, the only one with the atom bomb, the least scarred by modern war, an initiator of the United Nations that we thought would distribute Western influence throughout the world. Freedom and equality for each individual, government of, by, and for the people. These American values we found good, principles by which we could live as men. Many of us began maturing in complacency. As we grew, however, our comfort was penetrated by events too troubling to dismiss. First, the permeating and victimizing fact of human degradation, symbolized by the Southern struggle against racial bigotry, compelled most of us from silence to activism. Second, the enclosing fact of the Cold War, symbolized by the presence of the bomb, brought awareness that we ourselves and our friends and millions of abstract others we knew more directly because of our common peril might die at any time. The students of Democratic Society!
That's right.
Seems Stan has advised me that I was right on my mystery document guess. The students of the Democratic Society. In the 1960s and 70s, the rise of the New Left was promoted through movements and groups such as the SDS. The SDS specifically was made up of students who had banded together in the name of issues such as civil rights and nuclear disarmament. Awakened from the political activism of the 50s, displayed through sit-ins and the like, this movement was the proponent of a new, forward-thinking. SDS headed the major student movement of the 60s. Other major socio-political waves of this era included a renewal in the feminist ideals in the pink movement, in cases such as Roe v. Wade sparking the abortion debate that continued 50 years later, the Yellow Power in Asian Americans, the Brown Power or the Chicano movement, Green Power, self-explanatory, and Silent Spring, the Red Power in Native Americans, or the Rainbow Power promoting gay pride. As the hippies are commonly known for their flowy pants, flowery hair, and carefree lifestyle, they stood for ideals far beyond that. At the end of World War II came the emergence of the baby boom, and with this came a generation of kids that would later participate in the rethinking of the direction of the American Democratic Society. Related to the hippie counterculture, this emerging generation was the New Left, a youth-dominated political movement, embodied in organizations like SDS. SDS led campus protests about the shortcomings of American life, such as racial injustice and the Vietnam War. Like SDS, the New Left was characterized by making peace and love, not war. They rejected normal American lifestyle for their belief in rock and roll, drugs, sexual freedom, free speech, and civil rights. With the outbreak of musicians like Bob Dylan, the Beatles, and Jimi Hendrix, the music was increasingly influenced by drugs and sex and the ideals of a new generation. Peace signs, tie-dye, flowers, flowy pants, and scandalous clothing of the counterculture reflected their belief in freedom of expression and acceptance while continuing to protest previous societal norms. Clothing and music weren't the only way to protest and express. There was also the outbreak of drug use, of marijuana, and LSD, and others. And now with Stan to the thought bubble.
Of all the youth trends of the 60s, there are few that concern authorities more than the rise in youth drug rates. One of the most prevalent drugs involved with the 60s has to be LSD. And for that, we go to our thought bubble. LSD was first created in 1938 by Albert Hofmann, a Swiss chemist whose goal was to synthesize the active compound in the fungus ergot for use in pharmaceuticals. However, when he touched his eyes and nose in the resynthesizing of the compound, he quickly learned the drug's powerful hallucinogenic effects. Hoffman, along with scientists such as Timothy Leary and Al Hubbard, became major proponents for its potential in treating mental illness and for personal growth. Conducting several experiments and doing thorough research into the field during its 30 years of legality, they helped to further knowledge on this subject. While LSD for a time stayed relatively obscure and regulated, by the 1960s it penetrated popular culture. Artists such as the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Grateful Dead, Jimi Hendrix, and Pink Floyd all used the drug and incorporated it into their unique styles of music. In addition, it had grown quite popular by the 60s among the youth as a recreational drug. For this reason, it is closely associated with the counterculture movement. To curb what was seen as a growing drug problem among the youth, LSD was banned in 1961 and put as a Schedule I substance in 1970, making its sale, possession, and manufacturing illegal in all 50 states. So thanks, counterculture movement. Because of you, our elderly cannot get the acid they so desperately need. Somebody say drugs? You'll understand when you're older.
Overall, the New Left was a time of drastic social change in the United States. It was led by the youth of a generation brought up under a time of ideological revolution, challenging all of the preconceived notions formed by those before them, instigating a new agenda based on the ideals which would use usher in a deeper understanding, contradicting the previous cookie-cutter-based system America had been operating under. These revolutionaries brought about a complete 360 from the previous counterculture, emerging into the new counterculture. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, America. But really, consider the prevalent juxtaposed opinions of Okay, now that we're back, seriously, consider the juxtaposed positions of the masses. From Nixon's silent majority to the youth's socio-political revolution, was America moving away from the traditional standards that had shaped American identity as Nixon claimed? Or rather, was the idealistic America becoming hypocritical and unrealistic, exemplified in youth action and revolution? Again, we find ourselves caught in the pendulum of history. This era brought about questions of faith, of humanity, of acknowledgement. Should we, as a country, strive in hypocrisy to attain the unattainable vision that is the American dream? Or are we all just blurring the lines of reality? See you next week. John Green.